Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I've had a bit of experience working with CFV in the past with your 65 Roses Day and also at your student leadership camp, and I myself have been impressed by the level of commitment and the passion that you have for your course. So today, hopefully, you'll learn a little bit about the work that I do, a little bit about my background, and what I'll do, I guess, as Felicia pointed out, is share a little bit of my own personal and professional journey. It's a journey that definitely changed my life, but I'd like to think it also changed the lives of many vulnerable Australians along the way. But I'll start off with a little bit of personal background, just to give you a sense of my background and where I come from and my roots as such. So my parents migrated to Australia in the late 1960s as part of the migration wave of that time. Essentially arrived from southern Peloponnese of Greece, which is a little village, subsistent village where things were tough, and obviously as part of the opportunity that immigration gave them, they arrived to Australia for further opportunities and to explore the wonders and opportunities of this country. So I had two children, myself and my sister, blue-collar workers, because the one thing that they lacked, the opportunity that they had, was they weren't able to get a formal education as such. So the one thing that they always espoused and encouraged amongst both myself and my sister was to get a formal education. Now, that was a good thing, and they worked hard and made many sacrifices to provide that, but the one thing that came at the expense of, well, I like to think of, was my sporting career, because I had a passion and a love to play sport, whether football or soccer or cricket, tennis. I used to eat it, breathe it and sleep it like most Australians, young people as such. But my parents always espoused education, and that was never going to be at the expense of any football games or soccer games as such. So, I always had this dream to represent my country, to play at the elite level. Wasn't really going to happen until later on. As you got to hear, I got to represent my country in a pretty indirect and maybe obscure, but I like to think a meaningful way. But it did happen. So, as a student, I was pretty good, but had my eye on the footy and had my eye playing sports. So what to do? But I ended up, before you know it, doing a science degree at University of Melbourne. And it wasn't until I found the discipline of psychology, which we all know is exploring the way people think and behave and helping those who might need a helping hand, that I sort of realised my calling in life. And psychology was the way for me to move forward and to understand basically my true values, and also reflect on the inspiration that my parents gave me. My mother particularly was a pillar of strength, this petite little Greek woman who, when the going got tough, she got tougher. And my dad was the president of our local church too. So very community-minded people, and they, would espouse those community values to me as well. So it's only when I discovered that, psychology was for me, and helping people and to work with people and to communicate with people, that it sort of rang home that perhaps this was going to be a career that I might forge and a career that I might enter. But my first job out of university was, how should I put it, hit me over the head, and a dose of perspective that I would never have realised. And it was working in the public housing estates in the Collingwood high-rise, where essentially I would be supporting a lot of the homeless, marginalised people who were entering public housing estates. And so coming from, as I said, a place with lots of love, lots of attention, plenty of care, education, plenty of food, I was able to see something totally different, something that really hit home, something that, like I said, gave a different perspective to me. And to provide the support and tenancy to people experiencing homelessness was something that, no degree and postgraduate degree in psychology could ever prepare you for. So homelessness, I'm not sure if you're familiar, is a really interesting construct. So it's estimated that on a given night there is 105,237, just off the top of my head, people that are homeless. And that might seem an enormous number, but I'll elaborate a little bit further. It's not just those who might be sleeping rough, and let's think about it. Freezing night, freezing morning like today, people who were sleeping in park shelters, in parks, in shelters, at train stations and the like. You cannot even imagine what that would be like. But it's also people who might be couch surfing, so people who will have roof over their head today, but tomorrow they won't know where to get to. So you can imagine what that might feel like as well. But it's also people who are living in overcrowded situations. So in a room as big as this, we could get 10, 15 people sleeping, believe it or not. So that 105,000 figure stems from all those sort of situations, which is pretty hard to accept really and pretty hard to fathom. Now, of those 105,000, just probably 55% are men. About 25% are under 18. So the stats are pretty alarming, and the 105,000 that we measured in 2011 actually grew by 8%, the census before. So the stats regrettably are showing a pretty ugly situation. Now the causes and symptoms are numerous. So probably the biggest one that we should be aware of is domestic violence. It's really reached the agenda at the moment, politically and socially, but family violence, domestic violence, sees a lot of people on the street. Mental illness, critical factor. Depression, anxiety, we hear about it every day. People struggling with schizophrenia, people losing their way in life, again can render somebody homeless. No place of abode, no safe, secure place to live in. Now what does that leave a person? Pretty much isolated, vulnerable, traumatised, alienated from society. Affects their health, their mental health. So the symptoms are massive, the causes we need to address. So the work that I did originally, as I said, working in that public housing estate, was to get some of those into a roof, a place to live in, and support them through that tenancy. But the one thing I found, and I really appreciated, and they really appreciated the work that I could do for them and the support that I could give them, because housing is a right that everybody deserves. But the one thing that I found, that they needed something more than that. Now they needed a purpose, they needed a sense of belonging, they needed to work, they needed to study, they need to have a social life just like anybody else. Because sometimes we think, oh, we've given them a roof over their head and that's it. But I knew from that time, and I spent a good 2 years there, that I needed to do a little bit more. And that came a little bit later, as I'll explain, as my journey progressed further. So, after 2 years working in the public housing estate, I started to use my psychology in a different way, working with people who were traumatised by victimisation. So I used to manage a service for victims of crime. This was run by the state government. And I would manage a team of 25 people from all sorts of professional backgrounds who would respond to victims of domestic violence, victims of sexual assault and assaults, some of them recent, some of them historic. And we would get a barrage of calls throughout the day. We were a one-stop shop where people would call a helpline and find out about their rights and entitlements, find out about where to get help, where to get support. So my role was to manage this team, a multidisciplined team. And boy, again, homelessness really struck home, but this time with victims of crime. The one thing that you do find out is most of the crimes are committed by people they actually know. So that lack of, you trust someone, you're loyal to someone, but sometimes it's really close to home when you can get violated. So, the trauma people experience and the impact that it can have can leave long-lasting experiences. So to manage a team, and it was acknowledged as world's best practice, was awesome. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. But I must admit, as it does, it wears on you. It has an impact on you. Probably heard of the term vicarious trauma. So, you hear of parents who've lost their children through homicide or rapes that have occurred unfairly and unnecessarily. And, one thing, to advocate for the support that they need, for compensation that they need, the housing that they need. So it was another part of my development to understand people who are experiencing trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, and were vulnerable. So it was another great opportunity for me. But I move on from there to the community sector, where I went to an organisation called The Big Issue. Some of you might be familiar with that organisation. It was established in 1996, some time ago now. I think we've recently celebrated 17 years, is it? Yeah, no, 19 years. What am I talking about? Math is wrong. We'll be celebrating 20 years next year, but it was set up to give people who are experiencing homelessness and disadvantage an opportunity to earn some extra money and reconnect with the community. So the name you'd be familiar with, a similar concept, which is called The Big Issue magazine, which is sold on capital city streets by vendors who have experienced homelessness. So they purchase a magazine for $3 from the organisation and they sell it for $6. They on-sell it. So it's a $3 profit that they make. But these people are super courageous. We're talking people who might be sleeping on the street. We're talking people with severe schizophrenia, hearing voices. People who are struggling from day to day. And they put on a vest, a bright yellow vest, get out there on cold winter's days like today and start selling the magazine to earn an income, which is amazing that somebody could have the courage to do that. So yes, they get the extra dollars, but they get to talk to people in the community. They get a routine, they get a sense of purpose, they get a sense of belonging. They start to feel more confident about themselves. So it was great to be involved in an organisation like that. And in those 19 years, 19, I think the organisation sold 9 million magazines and put $19 million into the pockets. But as I say, I think more important to that was the benefits that people get from reconnecting with the community. So I went to that organisation to expand the magazine to regional areas, because homelessness and disadvantage sometimes gets pushed aside in regional areas because we don't see it as visibly as what we do in the cities, where we see homeless people on the streets and such. So I was to take the magazine to regional areas, to some of the Victorian regional cities of Ballarat, Geelong and Shepparton. But on my second day, and this is where this journey took another pretty crazy sort of momentum, we found out about an event called the Homeless World Cup. So basically the then editor of the magazine came together and said, hey, we've received an invitation for the Big Issue organisation to send a team to an event called the Homeless World Cup. Now, just like you are doing right now, probably scratching your head thinking, what is this? And I did it about 10 years ago thinking, what would a Homeless World Cup be? But essentially, organisations like the Big Issue, who worked with homeless people, would come together and use sport as a vehicle to try and improve their physical and psychological well-being. So they used soccer, and they'd meet on a weekly basis, have training and support. Believe it or not, they'd go and represent their country in an annual event. Remarkable. So what would happen was the organisations that would sell the magazine used to get together for a conference. They'd talk about how to sell more magazines, how to work together, and I think this idea came up at the bar. But they said, well, next time you come, why don't you bring some of your vendors and play football, and we'll represent each other's country and we'll raise awareness about the issue of homelessness. Well, before you know it, there'd already been 2 events. It's hard to fathom, hard to believe. And we are now being invited to send an Australian representative team to Edinburgh in 2005. So this goes back a little time. So the then editor of the magazine and myself, of course me being a sports mad, soccer mad person, said, yeah, I like the sound of that. Yeah, I like the sound of that. How about we give it a go? So essentially, the people who are selling the magazines, various rehabs, mental health services, some homelessness agencies, we invite them to come and play soccer on a weekly basis and see if they can get the benefits of sport that I received. Getting fitter, getting healthier, the discipline, the connection, the community, all the benefits that I thought that sport gave me. Surely the people who were feeling vulnerable and isolated and whose health wasn't as great, maybe they'd get the benefit of it as well. So it was a pretty inauspicious beginning, to be honest. Grey day like this, and we managed to bribe a couple of the vendors to come with a few magazines, but despite all the talk and all the information that we put out there to get people to come to the program, we didn't have many show up, so it was looking pretty dreary. And this idea of sending a team to the Homeless World Cup seemed pretty far-fetched at the time. Nonetheless, word of mouth, we just persisted, started spreading the word. The 2 that came absolutely loved it. They had fun time, had some sport, but more importantly, they were laughing and talking about how they could get fitter and healthier. So we saw a bit of a change in just their attitude, but with time, the numbers started to grow. They started to grow, and we started to form our own little team and community. Now, it was often funny that, we do a lap of the oval and some of the guys would light up a cigarette, which was probably not what we were looking at, but with a little bit of, a bit more fitness on our side, we were able to do a couple of laps before the obligatory cigarette. But nonetheless, we saw a change in their attitude, the change in the way they saw the world. I mean, Wednesday between 2 and 4 was the one constant thing that they had in their lives. So they'd build around it. They knew the night before, wouldn't take drugs or drink, so they're fresh, so they're ready to have a good afternoon the next day. Maybe during that session or after that session, if they've worked pretty hard, they won't get themselves into any mischief, or they'll just reflect on a great achievement of just getting out there and participating. So it's pretty awesome to see the camaraderie, the support, and myself as their coach, trained as a psychologist, a mentor, support, to link them into agencies, to link them into services. But we created our own community, and there was a culture, a positive environment to try and look after each other, support each other. It was pretty awesome. But we didn't want to just have these people who are already isolated, further isolated, just playing sport over there somewhere. Have a look at them, have a look at them. No, we tried to bring people together, so we'd invite schools and corporates, and we had some really fun matches with the police, which went down really well as well. But we tried to use sport as the vehicle to bring people together, link them to services and the supports that they might need. So the program was humming right along, and we had this agenda, this dream, this vision to send a team to that Homeless World Cup of 2005. And so that was another idea altogether. So you might think sending a representative team overseas, what would be required, the usual things, the funds to transport people over there, uniforms, prepare players, visas, passports. That would be difficult in any context, but let's have a think about a homeless group. That'd make it even harder. Think about trying to get passports and visas to get to the UK. Think about trying to get sponsorship to try send 8 homeless people overseas to represent their country. It wasn't going to be easy, and so we knocked on so many different doors, corporate doors, government doors, and the like, and basically got the doors shoved in our face. It was pretty risky sort of stuff, and I guess back then, sport community was still taking off, and for us to get that support, we were really struggling. And with about a month to go, or 6 weeks to go, we were struggling for the funds, and we'd almost given up hope, to be honest. We went on to one of the ABC State Line program, and there was a bit of an impassioned plea for somebody to come and support us. And we had a white knight, a gentleman by the name of Ray Horsburgh, who was the then chairman of the Essendon Football Club, who was also part of a big steel company, who sent us a cheque, $20,000. Sounds good, doesn't it? We'd all love that at any stage without putting in submissions and the like. But that was the impetus to get us over to Edinburgh. But then came all the other prep work. So we needed to pick 8 players. We needed to prepare them physically and mentally, go get those visas that I talked about and passports that were going to be a nightmare, get the uniforms and the like. So 8 players. How do we pick 8 players from probably 15, 16? I often talk at schools and the kids go, well, we'll pick the best players. We're going to win this thing. But as you might imagine, it's an exercise in risk management. So we don't want to take anybody that we're going to tip over the edge or anybody get themselves into trouble. And we want to see people who are going to prosper. But what was the culture of the program? It was about improving oneself. It was about working together. It was about turning our lives around. So that's what really was our criteria for selection. It was those who turned up rain, hail or shine, irrespective of their football ability, to go and wear the green and gold, believe it or not. So, long story, but we got there. And we went to Edinburgh and we had an amazing experience. It really was, for me, it was quite moving. Obviously achieved my dream of wearing the green and gold, but to work with the team of 8 players who, 3-4 months ago had come from, some pretty difficult times, to go and represent your country with distinction, to stay alcohol and drug free for a couple of weeks. I wish a few other Australian sporting teams could do the same. But it was pretty amazing. But to work together within a team, for me as their coach and the other staff, for them to follow direction and support, but to also to rub shoulders with people from different backgrounds and other homelessness backgrounds, was massive. And so we were quite successful, believe it or not. Some of the guys could actually play a decent brand of soccer. We'd play a 4-a-side format, which was like on a basketball court, and we'd play under Edinburgh Gardens, and it was magic. We made it to the quarterfinals. But as we started winning, and even though we were just having fun, the pressure started to build, and started to think about the quarterfinal. It was against Scotland on Friday afternoon. Big crowds would show up, so the home nation. And a few of the boys, we had 2 girls on our team who hadn't had much of a run. They were nervous, anxious. It was a bit physical out there. And 2 of the boys came up to me and said, we'd like to give a few of the girls a go. They haven't had much fun. Why don't we let them start the game off and get to experience, which I thought was massive. All this pressure of winning, I think, was getting to everybody. We just really wanted to get out there, have a party and enjoy ourselves and learn from the experience. And so the girls started, had a great time. The game was end to end. The crowd's getting into it. 9-9 with about half a minute to go, and Scotland scored the winning goal. big deal. So the teams came together and there was this great warmth and experience of, bringing people together. It was just amazing, and for me, one of the best sporting moments I've ever been involved in, but really epitomised what the program was about. It wasn't necessarily about winning, even though us Australians love winning and celebrated Matilda's win this morning, which was awesome, but this program was more about improving oneself, changing one's life, the culture of overcoming adversity. And so everything we did, be it picking a team or playing a game, and every decision we made was based around that, and that's what drove it. So many of those guys came back to Australia, and what had they achieved? They'd represented their country with distinction. They wanted to work, they wanted to study. They'd proven to themselves and to the world, really, when they're given opportunity, they can turn things around pretty quickly. And so it was great to see the impetus, the energy that they had, and to try and work with them and support them to different heights, which was awesome. But when we came back, when we were a program that not many people really wanted to know, all of a sudden people were quite interested in what we did and how we did it. So a little bit of publicity, and before you know it, we're receiving calls from interstate and regional areas to see whether we could run this street soccer program, as we called it, across the country, which was pretty exciting for us. We barely got it up and running here in Melbourne, but all of a sudden people were thinking, well, we can see the concept, and sort of people can relate to the sports side of it. So at the same time, a few of the corporates and a few of the other groups were excited by it, they'd heard about it, and so we were actually in dialogue with many of them. At the same time, the Homeless World Cup, as an international group, were putting out interest for future Homeless World Cups to be staged locally and for people to put in bids. And my CEO and myself, and we just thought this was a bit of a crazy, far-fetched idea, but wouldn't it be great to bring this event to Melbourne? We thought community capital, sporting capital, let's marry it together and bring this event to Melbourne. Well, who knows? But even now that we'd got all this support and got this impetus, perhaps by putting through this bid, we might get enough support to start expanding our program. We had this vision to expand the program across Australia. So we had a lot of support from corporate, government and community sector, and we put in a compelling bid. And as they say, be careful what you wish for, because we actually were granted and were successful to stage that event in 2008. But we got a lot of support from some of the big banks, some of the big mining companies, local government, and we were to stage this event in 2008. But before that, and this is an annual event, this Homeless World Cup, so 2005 was Edinburgh, 2006 we're continuing to run our program. It runs on a weekly basis, rain, hail or shine, we're there for these guys. So in 2006, we're due to go to Cape Town, South Africa. Awesome. Travel the world, represent your country. Cape Town, beautiful Cape Town. Something different, this time lots of African countries. Great tournament. Our players, same thing. After every game, we'd sing our own version of Waltzing Matilda. It was the way we brought everybody together. Some of the coaches would come up to me and George, the Aussies, we called ourselves the Street Socceroos. You guys been winning again? Doesn't sound like you've lost a game. I said, we haven't won one. But after the game, that's the joy and the happiness that we wanted to show. But losing can get you down. And so there was a game against Argentina. We're down, now it's a 14-minute game, 2 7-minute halves. It's fast and furious. We lost, I think, about 18-0. Our goalkeeper had a rugged job taking the ball out of the net every couple of minutes. So if you do the math, that's a bad strike rate. But our guys were flat, just a bit flat. So we're thinking, what can we do to pump them up? And we need to do a team building activity, or let's go see some of the sites of Cape Town. Well, some sites, but a difficult site. We went and saw some of the poor townships of Cape Town. And to see homelessness, destitution, poverty in a different form. And our guys, they didn't care about, any drubbing that they lost from Argentina. This was reality, that people are far worse off than them. What a dose of perspective. And so the guys were talking about how lucky they were to have the dole, how good their government was for them, how good they had it, living in a hostel and the like. So it gave them this massive dose of perspective. So we remember that particular event fondly. We finished 43rd out of 48. Doesn't matter. We tried to win every game, but we gave everyone a go. We had fun. and we sang after every game like we'd won it. The next year, in 2007, we went to beautiful Copenhagen in Denmark. So with another group of 8 players, again, we get to celebrate what we do and try and help them improve their lives and build our program. And that was awesome. That year we got to play the Greek team, which is obviously my cultural background. I think we lost that game as well, but the guys were doing the Zorba after that and having a bit of fun. But it was great to see how the program had developed, and we were doing more work with these guys to turn their lives around. So 2008 was in Melbourne, where, as I said, we won the bid, and we had a magnificent event which was staged at Federation Square. So we tried to make it in a venue where people could come and see what we do, see homeless people in a different light. And so we had 56 countries. They were housed at Melbourne University, so beautiful place for them to stay. They would play in front of big crowds. Fantastic time. They estimate around 1,000 volunteers were involved, which is great to get the community backing. We had lots of schools involved. They adopted countries to try and support, and hopefully their stereotypes and understanding of homelessness was questioned, and they were able to turn that around. So it's pretty awesome that we were able to put on this great event, but our vision was to run these programs across the country. And we had started doing quite a bit of lobbying, quite a bit of discussion with different groups, some of the corporate groups and the federal government. And so we thought through this event we might be able to develop some of those friendships. And what was amazing was the federal government funded us to run the program right across the country. So the event would leave our shores, but we'd remain with the program that continued to work with homeless and marginalised people. And so we began a project to expand this program all across the country and try use sport to help these people in a different way, which was great that we were able to actualise that vision that we had many years ago. So in that time since, we've been to Milan, we've been to Paris, we've been to Poznan. We took a couple of years off here and there, but another group of 8 players that we've had to work with and to try and turn their lives around. But we've also had a national program where on a weekly basis we start to work with them, connect with them, and we're currently funded by the Department of Health, so we're trying to turn their health situation around, physical and mental health. Engage them in sport for a couple of hours, but create awareness about health and education and trying to improve them on that front. So it's been amazing how that program has grown exponentially, and people, not just the 8 that get to represent their country, but hundreds of people across the country get to enjoy the spoils and the connection of sport. So I've been very lucky to have worked with some pretty inspirational people, people that have turned their lives around. Some people, it's been difficult. If I can get them out of trouble for 2 hours, I'm doing pretty well. But I've seen also people move on to work and to study, overcome substance abuse, mental illness, you name it. Sometimes the odds are stacked against them. Sometimes it's their own decisions that have reaped the situation that they're in. On other occasions, they themselves have been victims of abuse, just victims of discrimination, just sometimes victims of bad luck. But people often ask me, so you've seen people turn it around and you use sport, but what are some of those key ingredients that you've seen that can help people turn things around? And I often talk about SOS, but there's a few S's that I'm going to talk about. So I start with sense of purpose. So by sense of purpose, I mean something that drives someone, motivates someone, something that gets people out of bed. It can be a sport, it can be art, it can be one's family, it can be our work, it can be anything. But a sense of purpose is so important in all of us because it helps us achieve something, it helps us look forward. It can help us look back as well because we can reflect on where we've been, but we all need a sense of purpose. In this situation, sport and being part of this group gave them that sense of purpose. Like I said, it was the one constant and positive thing that they had to look forward to. It was a routine. So I often talk about creating a sense of purpose for individuals. And then I talk about sense of belonging, and a lot of these feed into each other. So a sense of belonging is, I think we can all relate to. Ideally, and many of us are very fortunate to have a close family unit and close social support that we can rely on. So when things do go sour, people can pick us up. But not everybody has that. So what type of support do we have to pick us up? What sort of safety net do we have? So people can have professional support, psychologists, counsellors, caseworkers and the like, and we're very fortunate generally to have a good welfare system and support system in place. It can be spiritual support, so a lot of people receive support spiritually through religion and the associated supports. It can be support from people who are like-minded or going through similar situations. So support groups, that's where support groups are so important. And groups like yourselves can advocate for people who are going through similar situations. So in essence, our street soccer program was a support group because people were all in similar situations, but they were there to support each other. But support also gives you the protection, gives you the comfort, gives you the care, and it gives you the love that you might need as well. So I've always said that everybody needs to have a team of some sort. So we talked about sense of purpose, sense of belonging and support. And the other thing I talk about is opportunities. Now, opportunities do not get given and aren't distributed evenly in the world. That's just how it is. But everybody does get opportunities and they come in different forms. And it's about individuals being able to identify them, being able to grasp them, being able to take them with both hands. And irrespective of what's happened in their lives, how lucky or unlucky they are, they will have opportunities about how they're going to grasp them. For some of our players, it's just the opportunity to come to a weekly session and try and improve their health. There's their opportunity. Some of the luckier guys get to even represent their country. That's an opportunity you don't want to miss out on or you don't want to grasp. I do a lot of work with prisoners and you'll say, what opportunities do they have? Well, they'll have an opportunity to rehabilitate themselves. And upon release, they'll have an opportunity, because most of them will get released, an opportunity to turn things around and improve their lives. So there is an opportunity for everybody, but they'll need to identify it, they'll need to work hard, they'll have to reflect on themselves and be honest with themselves. And sometimes with the guys that I work with, a bit of tough love. We can go softly, but occasionally I'll need to sit them down and say, this is what's happening, it's all back to you. I can only provide the infrastructure and support, but it's about the decisions that they make to turn their lives around. And so many do. And it's inspiring to see when they're given opportunities that they can turn their lives around. A lot of it's got to do with the environment. So we try and create a positive, encouraging environment, an environment where they can look forward. I think we can all relate to that. Sometimes we get into an environment where it's almost a bit of a rut, where one person starts talking negatively and then you get caught up in it, and you get caught up in it, and then it goes. So we try and create that positive environment. It comes from our coaches, or it comes from a leader. It comes from somebody who drives that environment. So that's one of the key things that we try and do. Because the self-doubts will often be there. Sometimes people get these opportunities and they don't think they deserve them, or they don't think they're capable of taking them. So sometimes it's your inner resolve that allows you to fight those demons that tell you you're not good enough or you can't take that opportunity. Sometimes it's your coach, it's your mentor, it's somebody who helps you identify that and wake you up and realise that you are good enough to take that opportunity. So I also talk about this construct of community leadership. So people often give me that title, community leader, and want me to talk to that effect. And in some ways, it's similar to any form of leadership. But for me, community leadership and working in the community area for causes or for different social issues, the one thing that I never deflect from, the one thing that I'll always remember and relate to, is that I must stay connected to the people that I'm trying to support. It is they who are driving me to do what I do, create the services that I create, or to provide the support to them. So I need to listen to them. I need to consult with them. I need to be connected with them. And as you go further up the management channel, sometimes you're further removed. But you need to get yourself back in there and listen. And hear what they want, and hear that some of the things that you might be creating or the things that you're refining, are they actually having an impact? So for me, it's so important to stay connected with the people that we're working with. So as a leader and a community leader, that's the one thing that I always espouse, that always remember who we're working with. And yes, I'll have the sensitivity and I'll have the passion and the drive to help those less fortunate. But my aim is to empower them and create opportunities for them also within the program to be leaders or to work through and to help the programs develop. So there's been creativity and there's been innovation. I mean, now sport is now being more utilised in working with disadvantaged people. The work that we did with the Homeless World Cup and sending teams overseas, some would say was risky. And in today's, I guess, environment of risk, you know, sometimes people are a bit reticent to create things or to be innovative. I'm from the other school of thought where you need to try things, but to work closely with the people that you're working with and see if they can help you drive. They'll inspire you, but they'll help you come up with the ideas. Together you can do it. So as a leader, you're just an important and vital cog in this whole framework of helping people. But for mine, I'm no less important or more important than the client, or the client's the most important, but all the staff, we're all working in it together. And I get to go and do lots of talks, and I advocate, and I do some media, and yet plenty of yapping, but it's fruitless unless my actions live through whatever I'm talking about. And that's one thing that sometimes I get frustrated by, and probably people out there get frustrated by, when these so-called community leaders don't reflect the values or the things that they espouse. So for me, it's about talking the talk but walking the walk. So over the years, some of the tough decisions I've had to make: send players home from Homeless World Cups if they haven't been behaving. You know, all sorts of things such as that. I've had to do that a couple of times, which wasn't good. But that was the culture of the program, and it's decisions like that that develop through a program and have created the culture. So it's so important for me to maintain those values, not only for my own self, but for the program. So we have a code of conduct, and the code of conduct reflects what the program's about. And me as the leader, for me, it's critical that I continue to demonstrate and lead the way in that area. So in terms of my development as a leader too, I have to reflect on the way I'm going. So am I developing? Am I performing? Obviously, I report to a manager and a CEO who will reflect on my performance, but I need to continue to grow, and I need to be honest with myself, how I'm contributing. So a good mentor that I have, who's fantastic at talking to me about my strengths and my weaknesses, picking me up when I'm down, but also highlighting areas that I can develop in. So it's a key area for me as a leader and working in this area. And the other thing is, and I know your CEO is here, but irrespective of, I haven't been in positions of management in recent time, but I still have the capacity to show leadership by leading by example, coming up with ideas, demonstrating to others what the culture of the program's about. That still demonstrates enormous leadership. I can continue advocating, irrespective of whether I'm CEO or at another level, but I need to demonstrate those abilities, that strength, that determination, the persistence. I need to work hard, and I need to continually evolve as a leader to try and progress myself, but also be at a cause. So that's just a little bit of experience for me, and I continually evolve. I'm doing some work now at university, Victoria University, where I teach youth work, so I get to share some of the insight, but I continue to develop my own self, and I'm doing some teaching, which is something I hadn't done in the past. I've been running sports program in detention centres with asylum seekers, working particularly with some young unaccompanied minors. Been doing some work in the prison, where I have been mentoring and coaching prisoners with intellectual disabilities, which has been challenging as well. So I've also had to take myself out of my comfort zone. I was in a good little comfort zone there doing my program, working away. But for me to grow and develop and try new things, I had to do things that probably wasn't as comfortable with, such as public speaking, or speaking to the media, or running programs in prisons. things like that. So I had to put myself in different situations where I can continuously grow. So it's been a journey where I have met some amazing people who've inspired me, motivated me, frustrated me. I've been able to see, 7 different cities with the Homeless World Cup. I achieved my dream of wearing the green and gold, coaching teams at 7 Homeless World Cups. But in 2008, the event was held in Melbourne. I was very lucky. I met a young lady who I ended up marrying. She was a volunteer at the event. So we're lucky to have a 2.5-year-old daughter. And so I leave you with this thought that it really is in giving that you do receive. Thank you.